Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are gathered today in this event organized by the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe, IDM, in cooperation with the Political Academy and Karl-Renner-Institute to discuss Albanian parliamentary elections that are going to take place this Sunday on 25th of April. My name is Fatjona Mejdini. I'm a journalist based in Tirana and the Balkan coordinator for the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And I will be moderating this event today, which is already live streaming on the IDM's Facebook page and on the Facebook page of their partners. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope that we are going to enjoy the discussions, but also take part actively in them. Today's activity is part of a series of events that IDM and its partners based in Vienna organize for important issues that are currently happening or concerning Southeastern Europe. After discussion about this year's elections in Kosovo and later on in Bulgaria, we're going to focus today on Albania and what is expected to happen during and after these elections. But before introducing to you all our distinguished panelists, I just want to give the floor to Ms. Elisabeth Mayerhofer. She is the director of the Political Academy, a trusted partner of IDM and Renner-Institute in organizing events like this one today. So, Ms. Mayerhofer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation to be with you today. As Political Academy, we see ourselves as educational institution and we have an educational mandate according to the law. We are a place where discussion can and should take place away from the daily politics of Austria. Because political education, as we see it, is much more than everything that fills the front pages of the newspapers every day. For us, political education does not only mean to deal with Austrian politics, but of course also with international issues. Because we think to make good politics and to make good politics possible, we all need to understand not only what is going on in our home countries, we need, so to say, to understand the whole world. And this is why we are especially proud of this great cooperation that has been ongoing for many years now with IDM and the Renner-Institute. With these events, we provide important insights into the elections in states that are in our close neighborhood. And we hope to contribute with this to a better understanding of the political and general situation in these states. Well, as you already said, there are going to be elections in Albania on upcoming Sunday. Just a few remarks on the current situation. It's been a turbulent period in Albanian politics. The National Conservative Democratic Party has resigned its seats in parliament in protest and has since boycotted the parliament. They are accusing the Socialist Party of corruption and electoral fraud. And since this boycott, the incumbent prime minister had ruled with his Socialist Party without significant opposition. After that, the National Conservative Democratic Party did also boycott the local elections in June 2020. Its top candidate, Besar, has now brought together an alliance of several parties for the election on Sunday. And as if this was not enough, there has also been a serious earthquake in November 2019 that struck Albania strongly. It affected the lives of more than 200,000 people in Albania, and according to the Red Cross, at least 32,000 people were left homeless. The earthquake was followed almost seamlessly by the corona pandemic and by a lockdown from March to June 2020. As a result, the Albanian economy was hit harder by the recession than other states in the region. So, of course, these elections are of great interest to us and the whole region. Historically, Austria has strong ties to Albania. Its history, a common history, but also geographic proximity that defines our relations. Albania and Austria were already important partners in the times of the old Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and late Austria-Hungary was one of the strongest supporters of Albania's independence. And today still, the partnership is excellent between the two countries. Austria is the 6th largest investor in Albania, with our companies spending 566 million euros in 2020. And since 1992, Albania is one of the priority countries of the Austrian Development Agency. And Austria also stated that role as Albania, as one of Albania's biggest supporters in the government program. And the EU perspective on the country is important to us too. Albania, just like other countries in the region of the Western Balkans, belongs from our point of view to the European Union, and the EU is for us not complete without these countries. And therefore, I hope we will be able to give you a good insight and overview on the current political situation and also a future outlook on what these elections can mean for Albania and for Albanian politics. And thanks again to our partners, IDM and Renner-Institute, and for all the staff and team members who made that event possible, and of course also to our panelists. And I hope we will give you good insights and a good overview of where Albania is heading to. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mayerhofer, for your welcome speech and also giving us an overview of what has happened in Albania in the last 4 years. And indeed, I mean, the earthquake that shocked Albania in November 2019, but also the pandemic that followed last year and currently being present in Albania and in all the world are important topics. And they have also their place in these elections, and we are seeing the prime minister of the country that is relying his electoral campaign on these two very kind of like unfortunate kind of like events that has happened in the last 2 years. So thank you very much again. So now it's my turn to introduce our panelists. So we have with us Ms. Edlira Gjoni, the founder of the Impact Center in Albania. We have Mr. Besar Likmeta, editor-in-chief at Reporter.al and the country editor for Albania at the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network BIRN. We have also Ms. Dafina Peci, director of the National Youth Congress in Albania. Last but not least, we have the pleasure to also have with us Ms. Franziska Tschinderle, a journalist covering the Western Balkans for Profil newspaper in Austria. Last year, she also published a book on Albania. So welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure to have you here today. I also want to invite everybody following this event to feel free and use the chat function or the Q&A function to type in your questions for our panelists. But I also encourage you to please raise your hand, take the floor and directly pose this question to them. So now I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Gjoni so she can provide us with a short briefing about these upcoming elections in Albania. Edlira, over to you. Edlira, I think you are...
Sorry, I am...
Unmute yourself.
Okay, am I okay now?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, can I say, I know I said, can I share the screen? I see I have some host credits here. So am I sharing the screen, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good, thank you very much. Okay, so what is happening in the next 7 minutes, my task is to give you a little bit of an overview for such a complicated situation that we have in our country for our upcoming elections. Just a sec, I need here to, yeah. Very good, okay. It's going to be our 11th election since 1991, but only twice since that year, since the communism fall, we've been able to complete a full term of our governments. And in the other 9 times, 4 years for each of the ruling parties in Albania. This is, I'd like to see that as a quasi-stable indication of a democracy for a post-dictatorial country. We're not doing that bad there. If we look at our neighboring country from the Western world, Italy, they have changed many more governments that we had, and same did Kosovo, also only in the last 2 years they have changed as many governments as we have changed since 1991. Now, whether that is a good sign of a democracy, I don't know, but we have a certain stability here with our governments with only 2 uncompleted terms. But regarding the forthcoming elections, how was it that we got here where we are? As you've heard also from the introduction, the ruling party is the socialist leftist wing party, ruling almost alone since 2019, since February 2019, when the opposition decided to relinquish its 66 mandates. But the Central Electoral Committee was very fast to fill the seats from what I call the reserves, or those who were in the non-winning list, listed from the DP, which is the main party of the opposition. So currently we have the Socialist Party, the leftist, since June 2017 with 74 seats, and they are hoping to win this time more than 76. This is what is their minimum claim, according to the Prime Minister, who is leading that party. Now, since there was this big political drama in Albania since 2019, it was decided that the opposition, the main party of the opposition, the DP, could not stay outside the parliament for too long, because then it would make no sense for a real democracy, if we want to call that. And hence, with very high pressure from international actors, including all EU states and Austria, but mainly led by the friends of the American embassy, a political council was created, which was a cross-party mechanism for our parties to come together and to negotiate and to see what they could do within this term to amend the electoral code and the election administration. It happened, and a deal was signed on the 5th of June 2020 overnight, as many hasty things and decisions in Albania are made when phone calls and SMSs arrive at the MPs' phones, and they are somehow obliged to sign or to vote at the very last minute. And so it happened on the 5th of June 2020. We had this kind of deal, which then took the parliament to adopt the electoral code in October 2020. What does this bring, and what is the news here? Well, ideally, it would have brought the strengthening and the guarantees of the gender representation. We are very good there. For the first time in Albania, 552 candidates are running, which is more than 30%, just a little over 30% of the candidates. That happened because of the new code, where before the Central Electoral Committee would not accept or would fine the political parties who had not placed women's names on the list. But this time, the difference is the CC, the Central Electoral Committee, would not accept any list that did have less than 30% of women. So we're good in that department. It also brought the safeguards against the misuse of public resources, but this is where we have an extremely big dispute right now, as we have a kind of a mix between the roles of our politicians, and we do not understand at what time of the day they are politicians and at what time of the day they are public servants. But the call has been made from the CEC to stop using the public resources, human resources, and as well as financial resources and time as well, of all our ministers and mayors and every civil servant that is planning and is doing electoral campaign during the day. Only last week, the CEC, under too much pressure from the international community as well as NGOs, released a statement asking our public administration to refrain from even sharing and liking public political campaign posts in their private pages as long as they are public servants. Now, whether this is really being followed or not, that's a completely different matter, and I think there is still a lot of room for improvement there, as the government just sees, and it is even justifying the presence and the use of public resources and investments of the government as investments of one political party. So apart from that, which is an issue that is being heavily monitored in the current elections in Albania, the agreement also altered the structure of the CEC, and now for the first time we have a state representative, high state representative of the Central Electoral Committee, which is supposed to be above all the sides, but of course, since we are such a tiny nation, this person, which is now above all sides, used to be representing one side in the past. But having said that, we still move forward to the next point. The news on this code was also the verification of the candidates and the nominations procedures, meaning we are fed up with having criminals in our parliament, and steps have been taken not to allow them to even pose as candidates anymore. This procedure is still under under scrutiny of searching and verification from the journalists as well from international community, as we still have even leading the list of some political parties, people that have been subject to being investigated from the criminal point of view. And the last point is the financing of this campaign and the electoral dispute on the mechanism, what will happen after the elections. Well, people would think that now that we have a new code, we can say goodbye to the old habits. I would not really say so. We still have 140 members of the parliament, but as I said, out of the very large number of them, about 2,000 candidates from only 12 parties, there are 46 parties together, despite being grouped into 12 alliances or individual parties. This is considered really, not for the first time, it is considered another test for our democracy, and also to see whether we can go ahead with our accession talks with the EU. It comes all on top of the COVID-19 restrictions, which have brought a completely new way of doing campaign from our political parties, which are using the restrictions to become very creative in using the technology. And the drones are very expensive audio and visual campaigns. The newest thing would be that the list would be open and that our voters would finally select their preferred candidate. Well, maybe this is not entirely the case, because despite the fact that the new code has modified the original proportional representation, still the voters will not be able to cast their preferential candidates or individual one, because it is still the party leader who decides who gets to be on the first or the most secure places on the ranking list. So despite that we have some boxes on the ballot paper, we can tick one of them, but whether our preferred candidate will go into parliament, it's a complicated formula. And most likely the members of the list who will go to the parliament are those who the party leader has ranked on the winning list. Let's say in Tirana, we have 36 candidates from each party, and if one party wins 18 seats, it is the 18 people who are ranked first on that list who will go, even though people might have voted, a good number of people might have voted, let's say number 32. This number 32 will have to break the average number of votes from the first 18, which is almost impossible. So in paper, it is like an open list, but it is actually not that simple with this complicated formula, and so voters will maybe again see that this is not going to be a new code, but as I said, mostly an old habit. Now, despite all these changes, the legal formula framework, which has hijacked the Albanian public discourse on elections in the past 2 years, it is really maybe proved to be a little bit of too much ado about nothing. Also, there is this paradox of 3.5 million voters that are proclaimed to be able to vote, once we know that half of us actually do not live in Albania but reside abroad. Nevertheless, we count the attendance and the turnout of voters based on this number and not on the 2-point-something million that we live in Albania. But today, for the 25th of April, the new entrance will be also the identification of electronic identification of voters. So for the first time, we will try to avoid double voting or voter impersonation, as it has occurred in the past, something that unfortunately Albania has done many times, like vote manipulation, vote buying, or many multiple mechanisms to alter the results of the voting. And I am afraid, although the new code really talks about so many things that have to be adopted, I'm afraid Fatjona and the guests here, we will have after the 25th of April, many disputes from all sides that will not feel happy with the results. And polls recently have shown that there is an increase in the numbers of the DP really approaching the outcome, possible outcome with the SP, which means it is not going to be a gap between the winner and whoever the winner is. There will definitely be disputes from all sides who do not seem to be calm and happy and or all agreeing with the changes that they have made themselves. Fatjona, am I still good? Can I still go?
Yeah, if you want. For
okay.
Yeah.
How many more minutes do I have?
I mean, you can take one or two.
Okay, thank you very much, because I really want to go just touch a little bit about the type of the campaign that we might want to expect. I feel not comfortable with the intense atmosphere of the political mistrust between our political parties in Albania. And it definitely does not feel calm to see the campaign that is prone to limitations and personal distances, not only legally, but we see that there is a negative campaign from mainly from the SP, but also with the intervention of the president, which is a little bit unusual in these elections. Just considering that the president comes from political party that he led for a long time. So these are the three elements that are disturbing the Albanian voters here. The tone of the campaign and the negative and the derogative language used by the SP, as well as the heavy presence and the tensions that are raised mainly by the president and his presence time and again. There is an increase in the role of women. There is very much disturbance and concerns about the use of the public services and party officials. On the media, I see that we have our colleague Besar that will touch upon that. I just want to touch lastly the youth voters. 107,000 people will vote for the first time in Albania, and that equals for almost 11 candidates. The bad news here is that Albanian youth are used by political parties only in rallies, and they use them as decoration for their campaigns. But when it comes to having them in the list as potential candidates, we see a decrease from 5% in 2017. This time we have less than 2% candidates who are up to 29 years old, and only one of them is listed in the secure, what we call here the secure list. So we might have in 140 parliamentarians next year, only one of them will be under 30, if we see at the list, at the secures list. And just for my last remarks, my last concern addresses by media and civil society is related to the very strong behavior of the Prime Minister, as well as the unusual active role of his side on campaigning and influencing the climate with strong political statesmen, both the president and the SP. Will this be the first real free and fair elections in Albania? We still have to see and wait and see the successful management of all, and whether Albanians will be victims of a campaign that talks about earthquake and COVID-19 more than responsibility or accountability of what really happened in the past 8 years and what expects us in the next 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edlira, for your interesting overview. I'm sure that we are going to have the chance to go in more details in some of the points that you already mentioned. So adding to what Edlira already said, I just want to emphasize also a few new trends that we are seeing in these elections. First, it's important to mention that in these elections in Albania, the diaspora doesn't have the right to cast their votes from the places where they live. Although the right to vote was promised by the main parties and included as well in the agreement reached in June 2020 between them, plans to secure their votes from the places where they live fall apart. According to the latest estimation from the Albanian Institute of Statistics, Instat, there are around 1.5 million Albanians living abroad. More than half of the population living in the country, actually. If we take in consideration the fact that in 2020, according to estimation from statistic institutions, there are around 2.9 million people living currently in Albania. So you can see like the really difference in between this big diaspora that the country has abroad and their like lack of opportunity to really vote. And especially now it's even difficult for them to come and vote in Albania because of the COVID restrictions that are available in Albania, but also in the countries that they live. So I think this is one of the most problematic aspects, in my opinion, when it comes to elections. On the other hand, yes, Albanians will have the right to choose between 12 parties and coalitions, but in 5 regions, citizens will have on their ballots also independent candidates. It's important to mention that in the regions of Tirana, Gjirokastra, and Leja are running 3 independent candidates that are supported by Vetvendosia, Self-Determination Party, which won the elections in Kosovo on February 14th, and now it's running the country. So this is the first time when a party of Kosovo technically runs in the Albanian elections. We have seen the leader of Edlira, Mr. Albin Kurti, to come to Albania and campaign for these three candidates, creating hopes to some people, but also skepticism to others. Kurti is going to also personally vote in Albania on Sunday because of having Albanian citizenship along with that of Kosovo. The situation, however, has taken its toll on the relationship between Prime Minister Edi Rama and Albin Kurti as the current Prime Minister of Kosovo, because the latter strongly criticizing the current government in Albania. This is really an interesting development, I would say, and we are going to see with much interest how this is going to evolve after the elections, and also what impact is going to have in the relationships between two countries. It is worth also mentioning that the current Prime Minister Rama had an open endorsement by the Macedonian Prime Minister Zoran Zaev, and also an indirect endorsement by the Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. It's good to remember that Rama, Zaev, and Vučić are together initiators of the so-called Balkan Schengen or mini Schengen that aims to secure more mobility of people and goods in the Balkan region. Also, it's important to mention that every leader of the parties running in these elections supports the European integration of Albania. The leader of the opposition, Luzin Basha, has also made this process an important part of his campaign, proposing as well that if he is elected prime minister, within the first 100 days, he would make sure that Albania starts the delayed accession talks with the EU. So that is all that I wanted to add. And I'm sure that we also will have a chance to further discuss these developments with our audience and panelists as well. But now I want to turn to Besar Likmeta, the editor of BIRN, and ask him how these elections have impacted the media landscape in Albania, including social medias as well, and what are some of the trends that we are seeing in this field. Besar, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Fatjona, and thank you to IDM for the invitation and organizing this really interesting event with important voices to share their opinion on the Albanian elections. I would say that more than the elections impacting the media landscape is how the question that we should be answering is how the media actually is impacting the elections, because the way that the media coverage an election campaign is certainly one of the standards of internationally recognized fair and free elections, but also the way that they shape, inform the opinion of the voters before they go to the ballot box. So it's very important for the media to provide a balanced coverage of all political parties. This is not only something of a professional standard, but it's also enshrined in Albanian law, in the electoral code, which requires audiovisual media outlets in the country to provide equal coverage to the parties who are the bigger parties, but also some sort of parity to the smaller parties, depending on their electoral result in the last elections. What we've noticed by looking at the data from the monitoring process that has been done by the Audiovisual Media Authority is that the media in this election has been clearly favoring the Socialist Party in power, providing more airtime to not only their activities, but also to Prime Minister Edi Rama compared to opposition leaders. And this is in breach of the electoral code. Also, we have seen that the media has been providing far more coverage to the two big political parties, the Democratic Party and the Socialist Party, compared to the smaller parties participating in the elections. And this is also in breach of the electoral code. Also, another problem is that the media, 85% of the coverage in the audiovisual media is provided to men candidates and only 15% to women candidates. This is also something of a weak professional standards in terms of gender balance. What I think is that the way that the media is impacting the elections is really problematic, because it's certainly the standards of free election have been already breached, and Albania cannot come out of this election and say they were free and fair, because certainly one party got favored in terms of coverage. And we have seen this not only when you see the whole media landscape of the audiovisual media outlets that have been monitored by AMA, which is like 23 outlets, but certainly this becomes more enshrined when we look at through three big private national broadcasters who control most of the audience in Albania, but also, unfortunately, the public television who has favored in coverage the SP, the Socialist Party of Albania. In the media outlets, we have another problem, which is a bombardment of advertising from political parties. Most of the political parties have already breached the electoral code and the maximum amount of advertising that they could do in certain outlets in the first 2 weeks of the elections, and we're seeing they're still continue to air and broadcast election advertising, political advertising in the other 2 weeks of the elections, as we're finalizing the last week. We can calculate, but by, let's say, a lower barrier, that at least 2.2 million euros were spent in political advertising and audiovisual media. And that's not to include Facebook, that's another couple $100,000, and other forms of advertising that we have seen. Certainly, the coverage has been more in favor of the Socialist Party of Albania. We've seen also that the Socialist Party has been able to create a bigger social media interaction when it comes to, let's say, the political list of their candidates in total compared to the Democratic Party. There is disparate views how this has been achieved. It could be because they have invested longer term in the creation of these social media accounts and following, and compared to the opposition parties, and this could be half of the truth. But also there is major concerns, and there's been, let's say, even insiders from Facebook that have spoken out just recently in this regard about inauthentic behavior of people, of army of trolls sharing or with fake accounts, let's say, posts by Prime Minister Tirana or other political leaders. And it's not only restricted to the SP, in order to cheat the Facebook algorithm and to make these posts more popular and have them in more people's news feeds. So there is a question how the media has been handling. But the main problem, which I see and many experts see with the media, it's not only the airtime they give to, let's say, in favor of the Socialist Party of Albania, the ruling political party, but also the quality of the coverage. The quality of the coverage is mainly airing prepackaged material or events which are staged by political parties and sent to the media without independent reporting. This is not only a problem for big media outlets, but also for smaller media outlets and independent media outlets, because the political parties don't allow independent coverage of the campaign. Basically, there is no agendas. We don't know the events that are happening, when they are happening. For example, you'd see in a rainy day events broadcast with in broad daylight and the sun is shining, which shows that they were taped a few days before. Or you'll see events which are practically staged, happening in neighborhoods in Tirana, and then they're broadcast a few days later. So unfortunately, there is no independent coverage of the campaign. There is no scrutiny of the political party programs. It's a theater in a sense. It's a political theater when to get more engagement on Facebook, most of the actors have relied on, let's say, a little bit of melodrama and also a lot of sexist language, I unfortunately would say. So you could see from the Prime Minister, his party, but also from the other side, a lot of attacks being pushed toward women candidates, and then this is unfortunate. If we compare the Albanian election, what's been going on in the region, when there's been elections in Serbia, that when there is comparable media advantage from one side, the elections have not been declared by international standards. And I'm afraid that no matter what the results we'll get on Sunday, and I hope it won't be fraud and will be accepted by all parties, certainly there will be an issue in terms of who got more coverage, who got more use of state resources, but also who got more, let's say, favored coverage by the media outlets, and certainly how this will impact the standards of elections, internationally recognized standards. I think there should be some reckoning after the elections in the Albanian media community, how these elections were covered, because I don't remember in my professional career the media behaving such favorably to one party or such being so lack of reporting in a sense. Because if you see, we've been doing also monitoring of online media outlets, and not only audiovisual media, and most of the time we've seen that most of the coverage is not even, let's say, reporting by journalists. It's statements of political leaders, meaning that they will report one ex-political leader said this and the other said that. It's a compilation of Facebook posts or statements made in a Facebook video, which are bombarded to the public one after another without context, without actual proper reporting, and without proper fact checking. So this is unfortunate. I think we should look at ourselves as the way that we do our job as a reporters in this sense, and also get some lessons learned. But I think this will certainly impact the way the voters decide. So that's why there is a lot of confusion. That's why there is a lot of lack of understanding of the context, how this campaign is developing. And I think that we should actually get some lessons learned how to improve this in the future, because we cannot have again elections of this kind without proper standards and without proper media coverage developing in the future. So this will probably should be some food for thought, but also a way that an understanding how this election was shaped and how the results of the election was shaped. Thank you, Fatjona. I'll pass the floor to you.
Thanks a lot. I mean, you share really some meaningful points, and I can also agree that what we're seeing right now is like a complete lack of understanding of what is happening, lack of transparency, and a lot of confusion, especially on the social media. That really is not helping the citizens to kind of like make the best choice when it comes to election day. So thank you again. Dafina Peci from the National Youth Congress in Albania is here with us today, representing the youth, of course. Dafina, my question to you would be, in your opinion, does youth in Albania feel represented in these elections when it comes to party programs, candidates, but also new political alternatives?
Thank you, Fatjona. Thank you, dear colleagues and listeners. Actually, of course, I will give my opinion on this, but firstly, I want to mention one of the latest studies of Instat for the period of time 2015-2018, when they found out that more than 80% of young people do not feel represented by political party platforms or the way how they execute the power after they come into the governance, let's say. And I would say that for these elections, there is no trustful or reliable source yet that I would refer, but from the experience that we had as a National Youth Congress in cooperation with Euronews and two other political foundations, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we made possible to confront 12 young people. There were hundreds of applications, and we made possible to select 12 young people, independent ones, going in front of candidates for MPs. And we found out that firstly, the platforms provided by the political parties do not touch upon concretely the issues, the merge issues that young people in Albania are concerned of. We should not forget the latest study of FES, when we found out that more than 80% of young people are not satisfied with the employability and educational system in Albania. And this was the major issue for migration routes. This needed to be reflected in a very alarming way in the platforms and public discourse. On the other hand, it was also mentioned by Ms. Edlira Gjoni very well, the fact that the number of potential candidates to become MPs in the electoral lists are decreased when it comes to the young people. For example, in the last elections in 2017, we had 41 young women and 63 young men in the candidates list, and now this year we have 35 young women and 19 young men. But what happens? We should try to see beyond numbers and read between lines. So from the SP, we have 15 candidates in the age 25 to 29. But to be honest, based on a kind of analysis, none of them is potential to get the MP position. In the DP, there are 5 young candidates where one is potential to get the MP position, and LSI has, let's say, the most of young candidates in the list, around 34, where 3 are potential to get the position. Let's say in the best case scenario, we might have 4 young people in the new parliament, in the best case scenario. On the other hand, personally, I would like also to share my opinion. In my opinion, quotas do help, but do not guarantee. I think that the young people's representation in politics has much deeper, let's say, problematics. It starts with the way how young people are educated, how they are politically educated and built up. We have issues with the intellectual discourse and the discourse among universities. We should not forget the students' protests. They brought up some very, very good points, and there is no backup on that, even in the political party program. You cannot fulfill your mission as a political party by putting a sentence which is saying that we will take measures on migration and decrease the the payments for the university. This is not all about. It's about how young people are treated, and if they are being taken, let's say, public policies and incentives to give them a meaningful life and dignity in the way how they are treated by the educational system, and of course the way how they are set in the society and appreciated and valued for the young age and the potential that they have. We should not forget the fact that around 559 million euro are a cost, are a deficit for our country because of migration. And there is no serious discourse on that. We are trying to do our best when it comes to mobilizing young people for these elections to monitor. We have created a team of 350 young people all over Albania to monitor the elections. And we're really looking forward for a trustful process and very disciplined and serious commitment of citizens to really show their point of view, their vision, and their willingness for the results. But I would say that I'm not satisfied, not even as a person, but as a professional or as a young person working within the youth sector for 8 years, with how this political campaign was organized and served to the public. It was also mentioned before from Mr. Likmeta about the social media campaigns this year. And I would say that these kind of campaigns do not give you the opportunity to go in depth and to elaborate more. To go through a fact check process, to have a communication and kind of accountability process among citizens and candidates. And on the other hand, the fact that it was a kind of strategy not to sit together in tables and discuss and go in depth and elaborate certain points. This leaves the people or the population without a proper information and deeper knowledge on the platforms and on the way how they are going to carry the process till the end. This is, I would say, more or less my opinion for now, and then maybe we can elaborate more in the second round.
Sure. Thank you, Dafina. I mean, your speech was had more pessimistic, notes, but also some good news that the youngsters throughout Albania are monitoring the elections. And I think this is a really good step forward, responsibility, and something that the youngsters have to do more. So as I already, now I'm seeing that already we have some questions in the chat. I just want to announce that we are going to go through those questions and also direct those to the panelists, but we are going to close first the first rounds of discussions from our panelists, and then we are going to open the floor for your questions. With us here today, as already mentioned, we have Ms. Franziska Tschinderle. that is currently in Bulqiza, a municipality that falls under the Dibra region and is following there the elections. Franziska, my question to you would be, as a foreign correspondent, what are your impressions of the election campaign in Albania, and what do you really expect from the election day?
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. So I'm in Bulqiza, so I hope the internet connection will be fine. Just to give a little bit of a context, Bulqiza is probably the most known mining and also the biggest mining city in this country. It's the center of the chrome production. And a lot of people here share the same job. They are working in the mountains under the earth to get the chrome out, and they are working for private companies that pay them extremely bad, or they are working for Alchrome, which is a company that is owned by Samir Mane, the richest man in this country. So we see in this city a huge inequality between those exporting the chrome and those actually digging the chrome. And I came here because for the first time, and this is very interesting, Bulqiza and also the region, Dibra, has an independent candidate running for the election, which is Elton Debreci. He's a miner himself, 31 years old, worked, I think, over a decade in the mining sector, and now wants to run for the parliament to represent the miners. And I was following him a little bit around the region the last 2 days. He mainly makes very small gatherings with people in cafes, tells them what he wants to change, which is basically very basic rights, not only that people get paid more, but also that they have a better pension system, a better health system. And he also points out, and this is very tragic, that in the last years, many men mainly have lost their lives in the mines as well. So Bulqiza actually is a very interesting case study for social democrats all around the world to see how can we actually change the environment for people living in this city, in this region. However, Albania is run or ruled by a socialist party. We see that the prime minister is not supporting, for example, trade unions or syndicalists, but rather fighting them. So Edlira was inviting foreign investors to come to Albania because the working rights are so poor. So we see this huge gap between what a socialist party should actually represent and how the reality looks like. And now to come to your question, how I as a foreign correspondent look at the campaign, I think the first thing to point out is that parties or governments, let's say from EU countries, they have a very maybe a misunderstanding when they're looking on Albania, because they think that the parties running really represent an ideology. So let's say social democratic parties in the EU support Rama, or let's say support Rama because they really think that he represents a socialist or social democratic program, which is, I think, a very big misunderstanding. What I've seen in the last roughly 2 weeks is a very deeply divided country. Also, it has already been mentioned, the very aggressive rhetorics between the candidates, a lot of attacks against each other, and also a huge polarization in the country itself. It's not easy to talk with people about politics here. Either they say that they are not interested anymore, that they don't trust anybody, or they are really skeptical against journalists in general, which I think is also has to do with the communist era. I also had the chance, and this is interesting maybe to point out, to accompany the campaign of Mr. Edlira for 2 days. He was speaking in Shkodra. He was also speaking in Beshkopia, which is very close to Bulčica. However, I didn't have the chance to get an interview, which leads us also back to the discussion who actually gets access to political candidates. It's not easy to speak to candidates. Interviews get postponed very often. And this really needs to be discussed, I think, who has the chance to speak to candidates. And I don't see a lot of debate here, to be honest. So how do the campaigns of Mr. Rama look like, or what does he actually promise? What does he tell to people? He spoke in Beshkopia, which is close to where I'm right now. And Beshkopia and the whole region is, as far as I can observe, suffering from huge youth migration. It has a poor health infrastructure, and people need around 4 hours if they want to reach Tirana. So this really also impacts the local economy. And what Mr. Rama did was that he had a huge, let's say, screen behind him showing infrastructure projects that are really far away from this region. So he talked about airports he wants to build, or he's going to build. He talked about ports in Saranda or in Durrës he wants to change completely. And I had the impression, and I also, with my translator, talked to a few people listening to that speeches, that this is not really what people need in this region. What they need is better local roads. What they need is better schools and better hospitals. But what Rama showed them for around 40 minutes were these huge 3D projects screened on the screen behind him, and basically telling them all these huge developments. It will bring tourists here. I'm quoting him, I'm guaranteeing millions of tourists will come to this region. And I think this shows us a little bit how the campaign works. It's really not about a debate with local people. What do you need? What can we change on the ground? But it's about these huge projects that are actually far away from the reality of the people. So this was the insight I got. On the other side, independent candidates that have very low budget. On the other side, Rama's huge campaigns, mainly happening in football stadiums. There were these drones mentioning that were taking these videos from above where you can see hundreds of people sitting on chairs. And basically this is happening in every city and in every county in a way, the same way.
Thanks, Franziska, a lot for your overview and also sharing with us your impression. Very interesting one. I see that we are already having a lot of questions in the chat, so it's going to be good, to have the chance to get some of them, or let's hope for all of them. But now I just want to go to Edlira, the last speaker for this round, and ask her about the tense pre-election situation that we are facing in Albania. Edlira, what we are seeing is a really tense campaign with accusations, secret recording of people in power leaked, database leak, harsh language. So do you think that this situation is paving the way for a disputed election result? So something that we also have been seen previously, and more specifically in the last elections of 2017. So Edlira, over to you, but please keep it not more than 5 minutes, so we'll have the chance to get some of the questions of the people that are attending this event. Thank you. Edlira, you are muted. Please unmute your microphone.
Okay, thank you. Do I see red flags all over and every day reported from the media, from us, from NGOs, from monitors? And what are these red flags? And do I sense a paving way for boycotting or questioning or disputing the results? Absolutely. I mean, we would not be professional if we would say that there are no red flags and that everything is just as perfect as the LED computer big screens that Franziska was talking about that we see all over the place by the Prime Minister, or even in the very nice campaigns that the DP has started to decorate and to upgrade in terms of campaigning with the voters. What will happen? I think the DP is extremely thirsty, maybe also to a certain extent ready to come to the parliament and to institutionally play a role, a missing role, missing for them, because in paper we have had an opposition in the parliament, but it is absolutely clear that the DP is thirsty and it claims to be ready to become again a key institutional player and to go back to the parliament. But they think that they deserve and they want to go back only as winners. And if we hear the rhetoric from all sides, it looks like as if in the parliament we will not have 140 MPs, but 350, because the claims from all sides are just so big that each side claims at least 96 to 100 MPs, which would really make us a sad dictatorship. But nevertheless, the leaders, I know that they say this in the frame of keeping the spirit up for their voters, but just so close to the voting day on Sunday, instead of relaxing it and making us as viewers or as people of the media or as people who are observing the elections for so long, trying to find indications that it will be okay, I'm concerned and I'm worried that it's going to be not, because first of all, experience says that the results have always been disputed. The outcome of the elections has always been disputed, and we have experienced a long counting process up to 5 months in 2011. And in the past, we have also experienced very sad events of parties going to the streets and taking the boulevard in 2009. Do not forget the Socialist Party with the famous slogan, "Open the boxes or go away," "Hap kutitos el argohu," which went on for quite some time. And then we had the latest, not after the elections, but just 1.5 years after, the drastic decision of the Democratic Party and the opposition to leave exactly for an issue that had to do with the election, and that was the vote buying or vote manipulation. So, Fatjona, I am afraid these red flags, and if you see them in the statements made by our leaders, the leaders of the three main parties, plus the president on top of them, as a very independent and above all sides, he's also making these strong statements that really favor a little bit the opposition. If you see these messages, they are so strong that they make us believe and raise concerns about the behavior that these parties will have when disputing the outcome of the ballot. As I said in my briefing, we have a new code that has also foreseen changes in the mechanisms that will deal with these complaints. However, they are exhausted. And political parties who are the masters behind the changes in this electoral code, they will, I'm afraid, they will make every use that they can to play around the changes in the code, to overpass these mechanisms of complaints. And if one party will definitely not be happy with the results, no matter which that party is, I do not think that they will be ready to give up smoothly enough or fast enough. And one big red flag that indicates that this is going to happen, and none of us has missed it because it's so clear, is even in terms of satire or rhetoric, but the Prime Minister has been calling for a possible coalition with the leader of the opposition in the name of Albania, in the name of the progress. So these are all indications that the political parties will do whatever it takes not to lose power, not to give up, not to recognize the result, and to dispute that for as long as it can. It is for me concerning two statements that have been made by the opposition parties in the past month. One MP former MP of the DP has said that they have now what we call in Albanian grupe të gatshme, which are groups that are, how do we say this in English? Groups that are ready to defend the vote at all costs. And of course, the questions here is defend it from whom and how, and what does it mean? Because that is the connotation of an armed group. And then the president that says, we will do whatever it takes to protect the vote, and if it is not protected, if the result does not come in favor of the opposition, then I will leave the presidency and then I will take over the opposition. Now, whether these are just statements made in the heat of the moment, they are definitely not responsible statements, and they do not feed that do not pave a way for a good outcome or for a good recognition of the results. So all these red flags here and there and everywhere, and every 3 days we get a red flag that cannot be ignored, make me realize and make me see with a little bit of concern what will happen in the afternoon of the 25th, when we will see that people are maybe, we will see the turnout and also the first indications. And then definitely I see that it will be not a count day, the 26th or the 27th, despite the new mechanisms of the electoral code.
Thank you, Edlira. Now we are opening the floor for questions, and I have already took notes of some of them, and I see that there are 2 questions, in fact, for the Vedvedosje presence in Albania. The first question is directly to me, saying that Vedvedosje Albania is independent from Vedvedosje Kosovo, as far as I know. Can you please explain this? And the other question is directly to all of us. What can be Albin Kurti's goals in Albania, apart from populist demands or dreams of greater Albania, which the Kosovar constitution could not allow at all? Now, please, who from the panelists wants to take this question about the Vedvedosje role in Albania, and then how this is going to impact, rhetorics about Great Albania, but also how it's going to impact the relationship between 2 countries. Any of the panelists?
Well, I can chip in shortly on Vedvedosje. Technically, Vedvedosje in Albania, it's not, I don't believe it's actually even registered as a party currently, if I'm not wrong. It's registered as a center, which is technically an NGO in Albania. Yes. But certainly the connection with Vedvedosje, with the party in Kosovo, it's quite clear. We had Albin Kurti campaigning in Albania directly for their supported candidates. So we cannot play blind in front of this. And this is not something Kurti is doing only in Albania, but he's also supporting political movements also in North Macedonia. Certainly there is a desire to create this pan-Albanian movement, a leftist/nationalist pan-Albanian movement in wherever Albanians live. Does this exactly mean greater Albania or not? Not necessarily. I mean, just because they're supporting political candidate to entice change in North Macedonia where Albanians live, or in Albania or in Kosovo, when they actually are in power and they struggled for almost 2 decades. But I think the bigger challenge of these candidates running in the elections or in the next elections will actually be the track record that Vedvedosje will be able to pull at home. Because one thing which it's great in a sense that their achievement is great in a sense when if you look at politics regionally, that a movement which started as grassroots movement was able to challenge the parties that came out of the war, the traditional party in Kosovo, the Democratic League of Kosovo, and come to power with such a plebiscite and bring also a new generation completely of political leaders to power. That's an achievement. But the greatest challenge that is in front of them is evicting change in a country and democratic change in a country and the good governance when there has been none, and certainly the culture has been where systemic corruption has existed for a long time. So this will be something that a lot of people in the region, Albanians in the region, are looking at Vedvedosje, but also are looking at some of at what their perceived tendencies of Vendosia as a movement. Some say the critics will say that they're a bit autocratic in a sense, they're much too keen on power. It is their time to shine. So this will probably impact how they're perceived, and probably will determine the future of this, let's say, other political endeavors they're having in the region. If they cannot, produce change at home, I don't think it will be a successful in the region, in Albania or in North Macedonia, to support candidates, because then their project will flounder.
Okay, can I just say something here, Fatjona, very, very shortly, because Besar already exhausted. Yeah, I think we share the same view. This question of elections in Kosovo and Greater Albania and all these things, then it's also another question that you might want to ask later, Fatjona, that is more into your field about another stereotype on the cannabis and drug and dealing. So there are certain stereotypes about Albania, and two of them are the Kosovo influence and Greater Albania. Or do we influence in Kosovo? Does Kosovo influences on us? And what is this Greater Albania? And also the statement that we have not mentioned, we're not mentioning here, the statement of Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić about our elections, etc. Zaev has also made a statement, come on, we live in a small region, we know each other, we are neighbors. Do we dream of Greater Albania? This is not an Albanian term. Now, do you want people, Europe, to say to us that we do not care or we do not love Kosovo, or Kosovo does not love us or want us? No, this is not true. Of course, we are the same people, but we are living in independent states, and that's that. That's it. Vetvendosia is in Albania here just doing, it has a legal status as an NGO, and it runs more as number 13 in our list are people who run independently. So Europe can sleep calmly here. Vetvendosia is not running as a political party in Albania. Their candidates are independent, and they will be mostly welcome in the parliament if they win. But it is, if I can say, it is unlikely, as supporters here will decide for the usual suspects that we just used to. So nothing to worry in Europe about that, I think.
Thank you, Edlira. So as you said, there's a question here about Albanian and organized crime, and I think that yes, I can take this question because of my engagement with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And we produce a lot of analysis and reports when it comes to organized crime. So the question is, there are frequent reports in the international media that the Albanian mafia is strongly involved in drug trafficking, especially via Italy. Furthermore, there are reports that Albania, being a center of growing cannabis, is this an issue in the election campaign? The question of drug trafficking is used in an argument against Albania joining the EU. Yes. Unfortunately, the issue of the drug trafficking and criminality in general, it has been used as an issue. However, I can say that drug trafficking is something that is not exclusive to Albania in this region and above. So what we are seeing right now is just we have a shift of organized crime groups from Albania operating in different European countries, mainly Western European countries. And also collaborating strongly with the local groups. So I think this is an issue important, but it's not just an issue that can be handled by Albania. We know that crime is international, doesn't have borders, and I think it's good that all the parties, Europe through its mechanisms like Europols and other aid and support and exchange of information can do a lot. And I don't want that this could be really impeding the Albanian process, because criminality is something that is not just born in Albania. I mean, what we can say, for example, about Italy, which is an EU member, and I mean, we have mafia and we have all of these things. So I mean, the fight against criminality is a work in progress. I don't think it will never end. But I think what is important is that to tackle this issue in a professional way, to have Albania police and authorities to help them in order to do so, to have more collaboration, and of course, more focus from the Albanian government when it comes to organized crime. I see that you mentioned cannabis. Albania is a center for growing cannabis. In fact, this has been true until 2016. And in fact, in 2016, we had like a kind of like a pandemic of cannabis cultivation in the country. However, what we have seen in the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen a very significant drop in the cultivation of cannabis. Now, if you see the data, but also if you refer to data coming from Guardia di Finanza, which is closely monitoring with Albania the cultivation of cannabis and also trafficking in general, we see that there's a very significant drop of cultivation of cannabis in the country. It's present, but it's far way less present than it was years ago. So we see, like, I mean, an improvement in this field. So yes, criminality is an issue, and of course needs resources, needs will, needs everything. But we are not seeing this as a main topic emerging in the election. So Albania has other big problems as well, like corruption, I mean, lack of investments, high unemployment rates, and issues like that. So I really hope that I replied to your question. So we have 2 questions, in fact, when it comes to the role of the internationals. So one is for Edlira and the other is for all of you. Edlira, what do you expect from the international in this hot internal situation? Do you think that they will play a big role? And the other question is, what is your opinion regarding to the role of international factors in these elections? Is their role perceived positively? Should they intervene more, or are they rather disturbing local ownership? Ownership, yeah.
Ownership, yeah.
Yeah, ownership, but maybe the idea is, are they disturbing, like, I mean, the political party leaders?
Yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, thank you to Iris, especially because she's been listening to all of us very actively and making really good comments about each presentation. It's good to have good listeners. Now, what is the role of the internationals in these elections and how are they perceived? It's been quite some time now that the role of the internationals is being disputed, same as the outcome of our elections, because time and again we receive kind of the same report that states in the first half that every election is perceived by them as a progress, but then they come back to the next election and saying you have not done so well. So the language of the language that Albanian voters understand is the language that all Balkans understand. It is not that technical or that diplomatic. If the internationals believe that there are things that are not quite good, quite right with our elections, then it should be maybe stated a little bit more clearly. This is the perception, and maybe this is also why these questions come forward time and again, and the discussions, as we know, Fatjona, in our media sphere, very often we discuss the type of, the tone of international presence in Albania. Also, there are, it has been politicized, unfortunately, because it has looked like in the eye of the angles of the reforms, so many reforms, justice reform, electoral reform, political reforms in Albania, in the past 2-3 years, it has had, unfortunately, some political coloring, and it looks like the internationals have taken sides. I do not agree with this view, but it has been discussed, and it is something that in Albania is being discussed, that they favor mostly the ruling party. Now, the ruling party right now is a party, but observing the standing of the international community, I would say they have done exactly the same in 1997 in the unfortunate year of Albania, where again they have supported the institutions. So I see it as just a normal way of the international community just standing next to the institutions, and that's how it is. Nothing to dispute there. I do not see them as favoring one party or the other, but I do see their role as being a little bit not clear, and at times too late, too little too late. And we have a big international community in Albania. I would say it is even maybe much more than we might need, because when it comes to reacting or when it comes to being fast forward, then they just behave like a normal NGO. So I understand the question and I understand the concern of our people. They are not too clear. Why do we have to have such a big international community here, even now we're turning our elections, and when it comes to what they have to say in the end, they produce just small pieces of paper, just like normal NGOs in Albania. So if they want to be big, they have to act big, and they are not acting as big as they claim.
Thank you, Edlira. I want to turn over to Besar. There's a question for him. Besar, can you please tell us about the fluctuation database, how this impact the result and the credibility? Maybe you can just give a short overview what the question is about and what they are referring to this fluctuation database.
I'm assuming they are referring to this database of allegedly belonging to the Socialist Party for the region of Tirana, which was leaked, and to the Lapsi.al online publication, and which contains private data of 910,000 voters in the Tirana region, compared to, let's say, this group of people who are like canvassers in a sense, or patronages, we call it in Albanian, about their political preferences. What I think is let's say the publication of this database has shocked the public, I think, in ways which us journalists didn't expect, because somehow we've known that these things existed, although we had no proof before. But I think that how recent were the private data that were leaked in the database, and this sense of this big brother feeling spying on you has really impacted voters. And I think it's brought memories of this bygone era when the Sugurimi, the secret police of the Hoxha regime, were spying on people of their political preferences, and this didn't end up well in Albania. What I see most worrying in this thing is that not only, let's say, the breach of the data, which is certainly worrying, because now you have IDs of hundreds of thousands of people and phone numbers on the internet, and everybody can access them, either fraudsters, although I'm not, let's say, an online security expert and I cannot opine on that, but certainly it's the reaction of the prosecutor's office. The special prosecutor's office against crime and corruption, instead of investigating the leak and the state institutions that have leaked the data, they're investigating the journalists who have actually published the scandal. And they're trying to sequester their phones and their work equipment of Lapsi.al. And this is certainly in breach of, let's say, international law and Albanian law, because you cannot sequester, trying to reach the source, the journalists cannot sequester their work equipment, because there is no way that they can differentiate between the information that they're trying to use to reach to the source and the other information that journalists might contain, and it has to do with the privacy of the source. So there has been numerous rulings of the International Court of European Court of Human Rights in this regard, in protecting sources of journalists. So this is a clear-cut issue in terms of media freedom. And I think the way that the Special Prosecutor's Office is behaving, it's criminal. In this regard, I think this is not only a sign of behavior one or two prosecutors, but it's a sad sign for the Albanian justice reform. I think that when new institutions that were brought to supposedly bring back trust in the Albanian public in the justice system end up being used to attack media outlets who are doing their job professionally and reporting on issues of public interest, this is a worrying sign for democracy and human rights in Albania. It should be a worrying sign not only for journalists, but I think for also our wider community. And we all should support our colleagues at Lapsi.al.
Thank you, Besar. So I have the last two questions. One I want to direct to Edlira and then to Besar, and I have also a question for Dafina, which is going to be the last one. So we have a question, in fact, from Celik, a guy in Albania. As we all in Albania are kind of like disturbed by this president role in this election. So how do you assess the role of the president in the electoral campaign and his clash with the prime minister? So I'll start with Edlira and then Besar can follow up.
Okay, thank you, Chalik, for the question. And I did mention even in my briefing, because it does disturb me as much as it disturbs everyone else, I believe, no matter whether you are a political animal or just an analyst or whatever, the role of the president in these elections is unusually active. He is not directly campaigning for any party, but he is clearly influencing the climate with strong political statements, and every so often he does come up with something that he has to have a strong opinion about. So it is unusual in the sense that previous presidents have really taken a stance, and they have stayed really quiet during the elections. Now, does it mean that these elections are more at risk than the previous ones? I really doubt that. In 2017, I would say it was even hastier, the situation and the way we were going into elections. And the then president did not intervene as much as the current, as now Meta is intervening. So I do see him, I want to read his concern and see his points, and I may understand every time that he makes these statements trying to make it clear that he will do whatever it takes to ensure free and fair elections. But on the other hand, that is not the president's it's not in his jurisdictions to ensure that. Now he claims that he's doing that on behalf of the constitution, but really it is difficult for us who have been following politics closely for so long. We know where he's coming from. He used to be the leader of a political party, and he is intending to go back to being active in politics because he's still so young. So now he is unusually active, and I'll just leave it at that, very politically correct, unusually active. And although he claims that he's not campaigning, he is absolutely influencing the tone of the campaign.
Thank you, Edlira. Thank you. Over to you.
So the question was again about Meta, right?
Yes.
Correct. Well, I would go one step beyond what Edlira is saying. To my opinion, the president is campaigning for the LSI. It's clear he's been behaving as leader of the LSI all the way through his presidency. This is not a secret. And even in the last elections, if we remember, Meta, when he was just elected president, Meta campaigned for the LSI. There was a feeling when the Socialist Party supported his candidacy to become president, that they were just gonna, remove him from actually the active politics. This didn't happen. Is this good or bad for the country? The floor is open for discussion. It certainly institutionally is a major takeaway from the role the former presidents have held in Albania. I think even the constitution recognizes that the president should be, the unity of the people and represent all people in this country, and even Albanians beyond that. So certainly the institution will suffer by Meta's behavior. Is it justified politically? That could be open for discussion. What will be the repercussions of it? I think on the way the institution is perceived will be a lot of repercussions, but we should not forget that abuse of office for political needs is something not only happened with the presidency, it happens with all Albanian institutions, and we should not forget that all government offices during election in Albania, particularly, let's say, a local government office, and we can start from the mayor of Tirana, other mayor's offices and everything, are actively involved into the campaign. And we've seen some discussions on them handing, property deeds and things like that, which the Central Electoral Commission was asked to take a stance, and their stance wasn't actually what was expected in a certain way. So this certainly, it's part, Meta's role goes beyond, but I think it should be seen in the greater context of how all political actors are behaving during the campaign.
Thank you very much. In fact, I want also to give the chance to Franziska, if she has something to share with us, her impression about the president, the involvement or the president's role during these elections.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's and also a good example how foreign journalists should go into details when describing a little bit the atmosphere in Albania. I was watching yesterday also a TV show, a discussion of the Prime Minister, where he really literally attacked the journalist and left the studio in the end instead of answering the questions. So I think instead of really explaining big phenomena in this country, I think it's important to also give small examples how the rhetoric works. And I think the president is also a good example for that, to show how, in which tone he's talking about Rama or other candidates, and how he's also, as it was already mentioned, misusing his position. And also, it should be pointed out to readers from other countries, and not only from Albania, that the data bank and the, let's say, data scandal leaked is really a huge scandal, but is not treated as such in the public debate. Rama, for example, said in a talk, in an interview, that this is very common, that it is actually a role model for other parties, that also the US Democrats or the US Republicans are using these kind of methods, which is a lie, which is not true. And I think also my job, or also our job as journalists, is to explain people from also EU countries what this data bank is about, and what kind of scandal this would be. For example, in Austria, just for a moment, think about, if there are any people listening from other countries, just imagine for a moment that hundreds of thousands of telephone numbers, addresses, but also very worrying comments would be leaked to the public, and everyone could know about this, and even more worrying, a party could use that. I didn't see much reaction, to be honest, from the international community, which also leads us to the question before, what can be done more? I think this is a good case study to tackle different problems in this country, how journalists who actually leaked this and wrote about this are being treated, and how political candidates reacted to this. But also how some people I talked to said, well, this is normal. This is what has been happening for years, that our data is not properly protected. So I think the international community was pretty silent on this. I did interviews with several of them. Most of them tend to speak off the record about this, and I think this has to stop. This has to stop in the sense that off the record, this doesn't change anything about the situation. Someone has to go out, also from embassies, also from the foundations, and tackle these issues.
Thank you, Franziska. So it's a very short questions about how many voters living abroad do you expect to take part in these elections. And I just want to just something before handing over to Dafina. So very little, of course. As we said, Albania, it is estimated to have 1.5 million people living abroad, but I don't know how many, but probably very little of them will take the flight in this pandemic time and come to Albania just to vote, because they, as I said, they don't have any right to cast their vote through the post or to vote in the places, in the embassies of Albania, in the places where they live. So it's unfortunate. Last week, we also had a decision to close the border with Greece and to put all the people that they will come in the quarantine for 15 days, if I'm not wrong. And I think this further create obstacles for many Albanians that live in Greece to come and vote. So really, the number of those living abroad coming to vote in Albania, it should be very, very little. Now I'm going.
Fatjona, just on top of it, on what Fatjona is saying, and building on that, because of the pandemic and everything that she described, it is foreseen that there will not be enough immigrants coming to Albania to even influence the outcome for one MP. That's how little, that's how few. One MP is elected with 10,000 votes, and 10,000 immigrants will not return to Albania for all the reasons that Fatjona mentioned. So not significant, unfortunately. Thank you.
So I'm just going to hand over to Dafina. Dafina, I don't know if you read the question, but the question is like this. I taught for 2 years in Albania higher education, and I have seen the lack of political education and the disillusionment among young Albanians. What should happen in the education system to encourage young people to participate passively, but also actively in the politics from your point of view?
I want to thank Ms. Sofia Turozzi for this question. And I put the points here not to take much time from all of us. So first of all, freedom and support the free academic research in the universities and encourage young people, young students, and young professionals to invest themselves more in academic research out of the box and for their academic purposes. And this needs to be supported and to systematically invest in this. Secondly, to develop curriculums and extracurricular programs in high-level education system, but also in the high schools and primary education system. Strengthening youth and independent councils in different levels when it comes to schools, when it comes to local government, central government, and universities, having independent bodies which do raise the voice for youth issues or students and young people issues within the system. It's very important because this is how they learn to articulate their rights, how they learn to co-govern, and how they learn to put the others in front of, let's say, situations that they need to be accountable for the decisions that they take. The other thing is to liberate and strengthen the position of political party youth wings near political parties. They are, let's say, very important when it comes to campaigns or influencing youth sector, but they are not independent. They do not have their own program. They don't work in a systematic way. They don't have their bases. They get activated once per election period. It's very important to have strong political party youth wings, which are more in touch with youth sector and young people in order to represent their issues near the parties in the best way possible and to protect the youth rights and youth rhetoric. And media collaboration, more media collaboration in this matter, in political education, political discourse, especially for those which are undereducated and underrepresented, because not all of young people have the opportunity to get, let's say, a education, a very, let's say, university or specialization. We know for sure that they have to finish the high school, but what happens with some, let's say, young people after that, it's very difficult to measure, and it's very difficult to tackle them and to involve them in the activities that we do and in the projects that we implement. So I would say that a stronger bond with media for political education and youth engagement is very important, because it will reach out to those people which we have difficulties on reaching out. And the last comment would be on this international collaboration and presence. I would say that there are two things which need to be rethinked. The way how internationals are coordinated and being perceived by our institutions and society. The narrative should change. They should not be perceived only as donors, but as partners. And in the way to fulfill that, they need to be more involved with grassroots initiatives and to be more present in the field when things happen, in order to have the proper contribution in policymaking cycle. We know that they cannot be so in, but they should not remain so out. So I think it's very important for them to establish a dialogue with civil society, as we have not seen yet. I mean, the proper structured dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dafina. So this was very intense discussions. We really have very intense discussion. I'm glad that happened in this way. So we had the chance to discuss about the electoral campaign, what is expected, how the election day is going to be, and most importantly, what is going to happen after it. So we had Besar speaking about media and how it's favorizing the coverage of party in power and how little space is left to women. And when the space also is left, like the coverage is often negative, including sexist language. But also he mentioned some important points when it comes to really not a transparent campaign when it comes to advertising and financing in general. So Dafina, you mentioned the main issues that and problems that the youth are facing in Albania, and especially they are leaving the country, and what political parties and the party that is going to have the power after the elections is going to really do, and how disadvantaged the youngster are when it comes to the in the electoral list of the political parties, and how little chances they have to be elected as MPs. On the other hand, we have Franziska that shared with us very vivid kind of like uh, overview of the electoral campaign in Dibra, and the candidate that comes from the miners community, Elton de Bresci, and how he is lobbying to enter in the parliament to really be a voice for all the miners that works in a very hard condition in Albania. So we had Edlira Gjoni that sees a lot of red flags in these elections, red flags that probably must lead to the dispute of the results, or some tensions that are going to happen after the elections. Unfortunately, we don't want this, but what we are seeing is like really harsh campaign, and some logic can tell us that this also might be the case. So it was very interesting. I hope it has been interesting and fruitful also for our audience. I just want to inform that the recording of the event is going to be available on the IDM YouTube channel. For me, it was a real pleasure to be with you today. Goodbye. Wish you all the best and hope we are going to meet again in other events of this kind. Goodbye.